Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to this episode of the Sharia Intelligence Program. I am your host, Muhammad Nuruddin Lemu, and with me to discuss today's topics are two of our distinguished facilitators and trainers of the Sharia Intelligence course, Brother Nasir Bello and Brother Ibrahim Bello. You are both most welcome. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Today we would like to carry on from where we stopped last, which was a continuation of the discussion on necessities, various levels of difficulties that people face, and how Islamic law makes concessions for people in different degrees of hardship. I'd like, by way of recap, by way of a quick summary, Malam Ibrahim, if you can start sharing with us some of those principles that guide scholars in making concessions for people or communities that are facing different degrees or levels of difficulty or hardship.
Now, from the usul point of view to start with, there are these logic-based tools of istidlal, they are called, that are always very useful when it comes to these issues of concession and rukhsa. Usually they have concern for consequences. You have maslaha, which is like a double-edged thing. Whatever will stand as a barrier or will create obstacle if we do it or if we don't do it. Scholars will look at it from the holistic point of view. Then you have istihsan, where what scholars do here is usually when applying the provided ruling of Sharia will create some bottlenecks and difficulties, unnecessary misunderstanding of Sharia, and maybe is even clashing, that is when later clashes with the spirit of Sharia. Then you have Saddu Zari'ah, where you call like sort of preclusion or blocking the means, where some things in themselves are permissible, but what we are sure they are likely to lead into is a bigger harm. So they will do what you call Saddu Zari'ah in the name of Taqidul Mubah and other forms. Now, usually what scholars will do, two things. The situation of the person that needs rukhsa. How dire is the necessity? Is it a very difficult situation that is life-threatening? They call that darura. Or is it haja, a very difficult situation, but not as difficult as the other one? They call that one haja. So the more difficult the situation is, the more threatening it is, the more the chances the law will relax most prohibitions in favor of the survival or getting him out or getting a way out for him from that problem. And if it is haja, of course, they look at the reality too and context surrounding it. That is one side of the coin. The other side is to look at prohibitions that they are thinking of relaxing as a way of getting a way out of this person in problem. And they will look at haram from two perspectives. There are those things that are haram in themselves. They are called haram of the means, haram of the ends, like fornication, like drinking alcohol, like murder, like thefts, like robbery. These things are haram in themselves. Another category of haram are those things that are haram because of what they lead to. So they will use these two and compare it with the other two, meaning the rural situation or a haja situation. That is what will determine which of these prohibitions is likely to be relaxed. But as a rule, the greater the necessity, the more the likely chances of the harams and the gravity of the harams that will be relaxed. And the less the necessity, which is more now like the needs now, then the less likelihood the possibility of relaxing haram of ends in themselves.
MashaAllah. Malan Nasir, what would you add to this?
Well, I think the most important guideline, as rightly explained by Brother Ibrahim Bello, is to acknowledge the direct proportionality that exists between gravity of hardship and concession or relaxation, and of course the seriousness of the form of haram that is permitted. Now, if you have a less gravity of hardship, like say haja, if you are facing a difficulty that is quite less, then the kind of concession that usually is permitted is such that it's at the level of the minor sin, or what we call haram of the means. So the most important thing is acknowledging this proportionality, direct proportionality between these three variables. Gravity of hardship. If the gravity of hardship is high, then the concession will also be high. And of course the seriousness, the level of seriousness when it comes to the haram that is being permitted will also be on the high side. If it is less, then it comes down. So that is the idea of the direct proportionality between the variables. And just like I gave example, in the case of haja, which is an important need, difficulty faced by haja, which is an important need, usually the kind of concession that emanate from such kind of situation is such that it's at the level of the minor sin, or what we call at the level of haram of the means, not the end, because of the level as I rightly established. So I think this is the very important guideline when it comes to discussing the issue of concession as it relate to this issue of haram of the end, haram of the means, and necessities, haja, and what have you.
So from what both of you are saying, and I know we've repeated this again and again, but because of its importance, when it comes to the conditions of people, you can look at what you call the thermometer or the barometer that is measuring the degree of difficulty. You can get somebody who is in a state of difficulty, but it's not life-threatening, it's not too severe, it's haja. A person in a state of haja is in a state of difficulty. They are definitely not okay. When the temperature goes higher or the barometer reading is higher, a person is in a more dire situation, and on that spectrum, they are now in a state of darura, where the daruriyat and essentials of life are being threatened. So on one axis or on one side, you can have scales or a gradation of difficulty, rising temperature, higher levels of suffering.
Yeah.
On the other side, you can also have low levels of haram, something that is a minor haram, something that is a haram of a means, or haram because it leads to the haram of the ends, which are more serious. So on the haram side, you have another gradation, moving from minor to major, and of course all that's in between. But what you are saying is, what the scholars do is, the moment you start going into difficulty called haja, from a state of tahsini where everything is fine, as your difficulties increase, they are ready to give licenses to an increasing degree of harams. So when you are in haja, the haram of the means become permissible. As you get into darura, then even the haram of the ends become permissible. I'd like us to start with the darura, or if you start introducing this subject, and let's look at the darura situation. For a person in the state of darura, what quality of concession, what's that state like? What quality of concession, what kind of quality of concessions are given to this kind of person? And what examples would you give us of that? Maybe we start with Nasir.
Well, I think before even getting into the stage of darura, it's good to acknowledge this very important standard that scholars really actually establish. The standards that actually respect the principle of proportionality around the idea of relaxation, that the quality and the quantity of relaxation of necessity that is being relaxed has to be justified. It's not all about open-ended thing. It has to be with the degree of hardship, as you rightly mentioned about this very interesting metaphor of, temperature. When the temperature rise, then they will look at the degree, they will look at the level of, hardship that is tied to that, and the relaxation will be along that level. And that reminds me of this very important maxim, الضرورات تقدر بقدرها, that necessity is measured according to its true proportion. And if you look at even the Quran, when the Quran talked about this relaxation on the issues of prohibition of eating pork, eating dead animal, it says the relaxation is because of the darura, and it is ensuring that there is no any craving, and of course there is no any transgression. So on that basis, that exception was established. And Allah said, Inna Allah ghafurur rahim. When Allah says, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ rahim. Now, if you look at the level of darura, the level of dire need, the level of necessity, scholars would always say that this signifies the peak when you are talking about the degree of hardship and difficulty. And at that level, even for individual, at that particular level, all form of haram are being relaxed. Concession is given at the level of the means and at the level of the end, at the level of the minor and at the level of the major sin. Some of the examples you would find around this kind of situations that will necessitate concession are like the case of fasting. Somebody that is fasting in the month of Ramadan and suddenly he falls sick, he cannot do it. The Quran was very, very clear about that. كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر. That whoever amongst you falls sick or is on a journey, then he can pay back sometimes, he can break the fasting. So this is a relaxation. This is a concession that is given because of that stage of darura that one finds himself. Another example of this situation is situation that we cited in the example of eating pork meat or eating dead animal that the Quran talked about. فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ. Another example that you would find is forcing somebody under duress. When somebody is forced to say statements that will probably ordinarily take him out of Islam, or do something that will appear as apostasy, as it happens in the case of a companion of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that was forced to say statements that will be tantamount to shirk, committing shirk. And Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam considered that as if they ask you to do that tomorrow because you want to save your life, you should go ahead and do that. Another example of this kind of situation that you would find is abortion, permitting abortion. Fatwas that are permitting abortion when it becomes, when it threatens the life of the mother. And you would find a lot of examples like the issue of permitting the use of cocaine and alcohol for medical purposes, the issue of exposing aura for the purpose of surgery. Lot of examples around this kind of situations where rukhsa, or what we call concession, is actually granted to situations of their necessity or their need. So these are some of the examples that you find around this level of darura where, like I said, concession is granted at all levels, at the level of the haram of the means and haram of the end, and at the level of minor and major sin.
Jazakallahu khairan. Malam Ibrahim, what would you add to this discussion?
On the darura?
On the darura.
Yeah, a number of things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, like he said, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ. Itturra means here, you are pushed to the wall, you don't have a choice. And there is a golden rule. That is, يعني الضرر يزال المشقة تجلب التيسير. These are important, meaning when somebody is in darura, as a rule, Shariah calls for ease and relaxation. If somebody is in hardship, somebody is in harm, you must take him out. Also, you have a hadith where the Prophet said, "Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyirhu biyadihi." You know, if you see abomination or anything wrong or somebody in problem, change it. فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ. You know, all of these things are alluding to the fact that darura is a special situation. Ad-darurat tubihul mahzurat. Darura makes what is haram ordinarily to become temporarily permissible. Similarly, also, ma la yutimul wajibu illa bihi fahuwa wajib. Meaning, whatever is a condition for wajib becomes wajib. So this whole issue of darura is important. You have many examples practically. A health personnel that has to save life. Saving life is giving priority over any other haram. So if somebody is in a situation that he needs to see a doctor or somebody needs to give first aid, whether the person is naked, whether it's mahram or non-mahram, whether you have to resuscitate through the nose, it's permissible. If you see an accident victim, darura demands that you don't even need to know who. You don't need to know how much. You don't need even to charge. In fact, ordinarily scholars will say, if you have a clinic or doctor and they bring somebody in darura situation, you just go ahead and treat first. If he's back into his senses and is healthy or the relatives come, you can now negotiate the price. So all these are darura situation. Somebody's parent is ill, your son is ill, or your wife is ill, and it is binding on you. It becomes darura. So darura situations are many. Like nearly scholars don't have problem with this darura. But people should not forget that darura is meant to solve problem proportionately. Meaning to say, you don't do haram that is greater than the problem you are trying to solve. You don't kill somebody to prevent murder. You know, you don't steal money to pay for debt. You know, things like that. So people should understand, while Sharia allow for relaxation in darura situations, it is to qaddaru bi qadariha, as it is said. This will be clearly understood. And that people in hardship, like we discussed earlier on in some discussions in the past, that somebody has no rent, practically no way. His son needed surgery. His wife needed surgery. You know, he's indebted. He has, you know, a number of issues, and you know, the rural situation. Or somebody is still debating whether you can donate blood or not. When somebody is dying, you have to. So all these are examples of the rural situation, and this is to what extent Sharia allow it.
I like the point you mentioned about the fact that when people are dependent on you, their darura becomes your darura.
Yes.
You know, when your child is in a state of need, it is you who is actually in the state of need. If you are the only one who somebody depends on to save them from drowning, you're not the one in problem. They are the ones in problem. But because you are the only one there, or the one who can swim, it becomes your responsibility to save them. Just as you've mentioned, like in the case of a doctor. You go to see the doctor because you have a darura. But it becomes a responsibility of the doctor to look at your aura. Even though it is not the doctor that has the darura, but your darura becomes the doctor's darura. Why? Because you are dependent on that doctor, and it becomes a wajib for the doctor to take you out of the darura. Ad-darar yuzal.
Yeah. More examples also, you look at it. Scholars permit somebody that is nursing a patient that he can forfeit Jumat prayers.
Exactly.
A medical personnel that is attending to emergency can forfeit or delay and pray later if he has to attend to somebody in the theater or is the only person available to nurse the patient.
Excellent.
When you have somebody that is a security personnel, when lives are under threat, people can be praying, he can hold on and pray later as conditions will warrant. And a number of these kind of examples that people really need to know the gravity and the relevance of their work to the rural situation, so that you are not in the rural situation and you still live. But because people don't have this sense of priority Islam gives to things, lives are lost.
It's true.
A nurse is attending to a patient, an emergency patient to that matter. A phone rang, and that becomes a priority, and somebody died. So if Islam will permit forfeiting your prayers and pray later, omitting Jumat prayer, doing this, doing that, and all of that, I think we should understand very well that Islam gives priority to life and is all about sense of priority. As a rule, safety first. And when we talk of safety, we're talking of life first. So this is it.
And I think before we move into Haja, also to more as a footnote, the fact that just as an individual can be in a state of darura, a society can be in a state of darura when a fardu kifaya, a communal obligation, is not being fulfilled. When you do not have enough people to fulfill a fardu kifaya, the fardu kifaya is lifted to a level where it is treated as a fardu ain. Sure. That everybody now is, has that obligation. So if somebody dies, somebody has to bury the dead.
Sure.
But if nobody buries that dead person, it is a responsibility on all those who are aware to take the responsibility. In other words, it's a fardu ain for all concerned that the society is treated as darura, and it becomes a wajib, an obligation on the leadership of the community to ensure that all those communal obligations are fulfilled by those who need to do them. The area I'd like to move into next, which is unique usually to the study of usulul fiqh, qawaid al-fiqhiyya and maqasid sharia, very important in the field of qawaid, is the category of haja. Most people outside usulul fiqh, even from tafsir, when you listen to the breakdown and the discussions on the verse that if you are in darura, faman itturra ghayra baghin wala adin fala ithma alayhi, they generally understand that when you are in the kind of dire necessity of darura, concessions are given. The areas that most people are new to are the category of haja and the concessions surrounding haja. Could you, Alam Ibrahim, introduce this area of haja and what kind of concessions does haja start to allow? In other words, as the barometer or temperature of difficulty is rising, what are the kind of things that are relaxed for a person or community that are in a state of haja?
Yeah, if like we described haja before, there are such difficult situations people might find themselves. Not life-threatening, but life would be extremely difficult. In our contemporary reality, you talk of electricity, for instance, or functional education. Some of these things are, of course, sometimes they could be darura, but basically they are haja. Now, somebody in haja situation could face any of these three. Haram of means are the options, whether they will be permissible or not. And we're going to look at the scenario. Or he's faced with situations on issues where there are debates regarding their permissibility. And the third situation is when you have a community that is now facing haja. Assuming in the whole of this community they don't have a Muslim medical personnel. They don't have people doing immigration work. They don't have a scholar or specialist in various areas of, and you need them. You need gynecologists, you need this. These ones become community haja. Now, they are faced with all sorts of, is it haram of means, haram of ends, and what have you. Now, the first category is when somebody is in the state of haja and is faced with haram of means. Here, Islam will permit it. And typical example is seen from Shariah. Quran permits somebody that is traveling or somebody that is ill to break his fast. You can see This is a haja. It's not a darura.
Not that you are dying.
You know that you are dying. But Islam permits you can break your fast. Similarly, you have a Sahabi who was permitted to wear silk because he had infections, skin infections. Silk is prohibited for Muslim men to wear. You have another Sahabi that lost his nose. You know, he has a cut-off nose. And then he was reacting to silver, mold. And the Prophet ﷺ gave him go ahead that he can use gold. So you have these kind of instances. Now, the person is in darura, haja situation, but but Islam permits what is haram of means. For example, somebody want to marry. Islam permit the man to look at the woman. It's a haja. Are you getting it?
Not darura.
Not darura, but Islam permit it because looking at a woman is haram of means. It's not haram of ends. So the whole issue here is haram of means could be relaxed when there is a need for it sincerely. This is the first scenario.
Alam Nasir, what would you add to this discussion?
Well, I think as he rightly mentioned, particularly the first scenario where the haja, because of haja, haram of the means is relaxed. You find lots of examples. For example, what scholars usually bring, the case of sitting at a table where alcohol is offered. Maybe you are there as a guest, or it's a political gathering where you have different set of people, and you're looking at the bigger objective or the bigger goal of being there, or maybe diplomatic cycles where you have limited option because of the diplomatic purposes that actually took you there. And another example that usually scholars bring is this case of removing hijab, permissibility of removing hijab for the purpose of fear. It is a fear of persecution in a place where the society is extremely Islamophobic. So because anything can happen, because of that identity or recognition, you would find some scholars, because of this haja and trying to protect the priority of protecting one's life, they will give a concession in that particular situation to that individual that found herself in that situation. Another example is this issue of exposing aura for the purpose of a medical test. Even if you are not sure anything is wrong, something like periodic mammogram, something like cervical cancer test, you find scholars also considering this as a concession because of the situation, that there are a lot of possibilities, so they allow for that. And one last example one can think of is this issue of permissibility of aborting a child that didn't reach 120 days. That is what they call before ensoulment. You remember this hadith where Rasulullah talked about the stages of creation. Inna ahadakum yujma'u khalquhu fi batni ummihi 40 yawman nutfa thumma yakunu alaqa thumma yakunu mudghatan mithla dhalik. That is 3 stages of 40 days, and at the end of the 3rd stage, then there will be ensoulment. فَيُرْسَلُ عَلَيْهِ مَلَكٌ فَيَنْفُخُ فِيهِ الرُّوحَ, that Allah will then send an angel that will blow into him soul. So some scholars would say for good reasons, actually. Maybe she was raped and she doesn't like the pregnancy. She decides she would want to abort it. Scholars would talk about concession and relaxation and permissibility at that stage before it gets to the stage of ensoulment. So these are some of the examples that I think I will add on this very important issue of relaxation at the level of haja, and of course relaxation of the haram of the means.
This is very interesting. You brought examples from the time of the Prophet ﷺ. You brought some from examples of fiqh, where a person in a state of haja, not darura, has certain harams made permissible, has certain concessions, but as you've demonstrated, some of these are haram of the means, or those harams that are minor when compared to the haram of the actual mafasid that Sharia is out to prevent. And you have also shown how there is a very sensitive approach to not just opening the doors to all harams for people in haja, but restricting the harams that are being permissible to be proportionate with the difficulty. So when the difficulty the person is going through is only that of haja, then only the minor harams and harams of the means are made permissible.
And
I
think this, particularly in this particular stage of haja and relaxation based on harams of the means, these are common scenarios that you'd find scholars applying these istidlal tools for the purpose of taysir, the istidlal tools of what we call the safety net tools of maslaha, masalihul mursala, istihsan, saddu dhariya or fathu dhariya, as the case may be, for the purpose of taysir, that is for the purpose of finding ease for somebody in the stage of haja. And this is quite in tandem or in line with this very important maxim of al-dararu al-mashaqqatu tajlubu taysir, that hardship begets facility. So it is about finding, ease for somebody at the stage of in the state of haja, and also this idea of maqasid of taysir, maqasid of finding ease, maqasid of relaxation, and being considerate of the situation that one finds himself. And I think it's also stressed the importance of the need for triangulation. Again, you keep finding a reason to talk about triangulation for greater certainty, and of course for alignment with the objectives of Sharia of finding ease of and preventing harm and hardship.
And I think I like the way you remind us that the names of the tools used in usul for these concessions, these permissibilities, are the tools of istidlal, are the reason-based tools of maslaha and istihsan, saddu zariya. And it reminds me of the qaida, the maxim that some scholars in the field quote, that al-haja tanzil manzilatud darura, that a haja can come to a level where it is treated like the darura. In other words, it gives haja the ability to relax certain laws. And as you've said, haja can relax those laws that are haram of the means and those more minor forms of haram. I'd like you to introduce us to the next scenario, which Malam Ibrahim introduced. A person in a state of haja facing a situation where scholars differ. What's the discussion there?
Well, what you find scholars saying in this kind of situation where a person in a state of haja is faced with issues of differences of opinion, you would find scholars permitting or encouraging the application of, usually these are things that often happen, according to differences of opinion around madhahib. And you would find other opinions that probably one disagreed with or differed with might be better solution to addressing problems. And you find scholars doing what they call talfiq, moving, keeping their own position and moving to another madhab, or moving to another opinion that probably they don't consider it to be the best opinion in their own understanding, but because it will solve the problem or it will achieve a greater objective, you would find them now considering it. Just like typical example of something that one would think there is an appreciable level of consensus among scholars around, is the issue of every madhab you can think of moving to Hanafi madhab when it comes to the issues of Islamic finance. And you would also find, so this is the kind of talfiq we talk about. Why? Because Islamic finance, the madhab of Hanafi have better tools that will solve the problem of finance in line with the principles of Islam. They have the tool of istihsan, which is very flexible. And not just only that, you would find scholars suggesting or going with the position of you doing certain things that perhaps in your own madhab, on your own interpretation or understanding, you don't find it to be the best for the purpose of unity of the ummah. Things like adhkar after, the kind of adhkar that some people actually do, particularly, or the issue of qunut, frequent qunut during prayer, or the issue of supplication publicly and collectively after prayer, that you find some people doing and feeling comfortable with it. For example, you are the kind that probably feels this is not a stronger opinion, or this is even bid'ah, but you find yourself amidst people that have respect for you, and in relationship with them, probably you can achieve a greater maqasid of unity among the ummah. Essentially, a lot of good will come out of it. But these are little things that you differed over, that just making a concession or accepting to just do what they are doing will make them even embrace you more. So these are some of the important things that we should learn in our relationship, or in handling our differences of opinion. And you would find a lot of examples around that. On a bigger, on a larger scale, looking at the contemporary nature of our society and the problems around gender, around marital relationships, you find some scholars encouraging the adoption of certain positions that are more fitting and more in line with the realities of our society. Like you find some scholars in a different mazhab will go with the position of Hanafi when it comes to the contracts of marriage, because of the provisions that are very, very liberal, and they allow for accommodate a lot of things. Another example, when it comes to the issues of divorce, how the Maliki mazhab, using the tool of khul, gave women the opportunity or the right for them to also initiate divorce. This is empowering in some societies, and this is relieving for some societies. Women feel empowered with the Maliki position when it comes to the issues of divorce. So you would find some scholars adopting, even though the society perhaps is not really Maliki, but in some societies this talfiq, this form of talfiq, has been very useful in resolving most problems, just like in the contracting of marriage, because of the complexities of our society. You find some scholars that are more conservative when it comes to marital contract and conditions around marriage, adopting some of the positions actually of the Hanbali school. And some of the other examples, you would find scholars encouraging the need for us to be more accommodating in around these issues of difference of opinion. The issues of eating Christmas food or collecting gift for Christmas, particularly in a multi-religious societies like we live in, because of the importance of interfaith relations and many other issues, particularly on these issues, like we said, this is a scenario that is looking at things that are not completely considered haram. There is difference of opinion. So because of this, greater objectives of improve relationship, interfaith relations, and what have you, some scholars will be encouraging on the need for us to be considerate. In some minority societies where accessing, homes of your own, having home of your own is very difficult, you find some scholars relaxing on this issue of, particularly the issue of having a first home, the permissibility of considering riba money for that particular purpose, because for some Muslims in those minority societies, you find that they hardly can find any other option or any other alternative, just like most countries around the world that until recently have Islamic financial institutions. You would find scholars issuing fatwa on transaction with riba-based financial institutions, because these are necessities. These are things that one will, to a large extent, have to engage with them. Otherwise, you will be exposed to a more daruri situation, a very their situation that actually will get you into the state of darura. So these are, I think, some of the examples that some scholars do talked about when it comes to accommodating or accepting positions that others hold as a result, others hold that you have a different one for the purpose of unity, for the purpose of, improved relationship and for greater good of the ummah or the humanity in general.
MashaAllah. Allah Ibrahim, what more can you give us examples that help us appreciate this issue of a state of haja that a person faces becoming a basis for which scholars would use diversity of opinion among scholars as a rahmah to remove somebody out of haja?
Yeah, a typical example is a scholar went for da'wah in where they believe you cannot pray with sadl, we cannot pray with qabdu, and he is convinced of qabdu to be the norm, but for the sake of da'wah he relaxed. It's fine. Similarly, he went to a place where you have to do one salam as the Muslim Malikis believe, or you don't say Amin loudly. All these are typical of Mazhab Maliki, and for the sake of da'wah he tilts to that. It's fine. It's not hypocrisy, but he is looking at the need and the greater good he is going to achieve.
I think, okay.
You have other examples of okay, can you do tayammum? Can you pray while you are in the flight, facing any direction? Can you enter church for interfaith dialogue? What of pictures of animals, animation, or animal pictures in books like biology, chemistry, where some scholars are still saying it is permissible to keep photography or not. But there's a need for learning. This is a necessity. Sometimes some musics for children learning, rhymes and some of those things like you have. All these ones, when you look at, okay, this is where there is a need now. And because there is debate over these issues, for this purpose, they will be permissible. Pictures and ID cards. Examples like this and many other examples of such, where there are debates on some of these issues. So typically, Muslims will say, okay, we can do. Okay, if somebody is tired, or feeling sleepy, can you combine Zuhr and Asr? Of course, a good number of scholars debate that it has to be a cogent reason. But for the fact that there is that debate on permissibility, when somebody has the needs, he came home from a journey, it is not yet time for Asr. He wants to pray Zuhr, he's seriously tired, he's afraid if I sleep now, I might not wake up from Maghrib, you permit it. Even if that's not your position, because you've gotten a way, a loophole, a little excuse, some of these things are permissible. Where some scholars are still debating the purity of alcohol.
The physical purity.
Yeah, physical purity, because some believe that whatever is prohibited is also najas, particularly the Maliki. So, can we use hand sanitizers? Now that we have necessity and the COVID protocol is
and
telling
some of
us
them
that
contain alcohol.
Yeah, COVID protocol is now telling us we need this to use these things. We said yes. So the truth is that Saddu Zari'ah, Istihsan, Masla'ah are considered in applying this. These are the bases where they are coming from. They will say from the Saddu Zari'ah point of view, from the Masla'ah point of view, from the Istihsan point of view, all of these things are permissible. And when you look at it from the bigger picture of Sharia, usually when you have a difficult situation like this, which basically what it is addressing is there is a need and there are issues over which there are debates. So what do we do? Okay? So this is it. When you look at it from Maslahah point of view, from the Istihsan point of view, from the Saddu Zari'ah point of view, and you triangulate even in that cycle, before coming to Qawaid and Maqasid, it becomes clearer, while the choice of permissibility here is actually better.
Well, I just remembered a very interesting example. I think it happened some years in this country, in Nigeria, where some scholars that are known to have a very strict position when it comes to the leadership of women. But because of a situation, you find them changing their position of fatwa.
Yeah.
Not because they are convinced that their argument or their position has now changed, but just because they feel in this particular context that is what will solve their problem, that is what will fit. So I may not agree with the line of the argument they put forward, but I think this is demonstrative of how scholars in almost every madhab find it convenient sometimes to switch if situation warrants. And I think I also gave a lot of example when it comes to Islamic finance, where there is sort of consensus when it comes regarding shifting entirely to the Hanafi madhab. So lot of examples. Sometimes it's something that you would find people becoming really emotional, and you would wonder on the consistency when it comes to the methodology adopted. You would find issues that are somehow similar, the positions are similar, there are things that are at the level of dhanni, things we are talking about difference of opinion among scholars, but a scholar being okay with agreeing or changing position because of situation or haja in this particular context on similar issue, but then becoming very strict and disagreeing in making shifting grounds and accommodating this need for accommodation and respecting the views of others, and even adopting that for greater good.
Because of a change in context.
Exactly.
Somebody has moved from tahsini to a state of haja.
Exactly.
And, as you've all given examples, that situation of haja is one where the person is in a state where khilaf and difference of opinion among scholars is not allowed to be the reason why somebody is suffering under haja. That the difference of opinion is a scholarly human difference of opinion. And because the haram is not agreed upon, the person in a state of haja is viewed as one for which the diversity of opinion becomes a source of rahmah, where that difference of opinion becomes the basis for removing the person out of that situation. And the examples you've also given, you hear people talking about fatwa shopping, where people just want to go and pick what is most convenient. And while that one can be definitely wrong for people who are in tahsini, who are just looking for loopholes, for a person in haja, this is a person with a real need. It's not dire necessity, but this is actually a legitimate reason for which scholars would advise, take a simpler opinion on which scholars actually have a difference. It reminds me also historically of the debate between and the difference of opinion between the Malikis and the Shafi'is on the basmala, saying Bismillah in Fatiha when praying. From the Maliki point of view, the saying of Bismillah is not supported by the amal of the people of Medina. And they actually, from all they have learnt, there is no basis for saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, then Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen in Fatiha for prayer. Whereas the Shafi view saying Bismillah as verse 1 of Fatiha. That verse 1 of Fatiha is not Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen as the Malikis view it. Verse 1 is Bismillah. And if you don't say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, then your Fatiha is not complete. And if your Fatiha is not complete, your prayer is not complete, because Fatiha is a compulsory part of prayer. So the Malikis view saying Bismillah as a bid'ah, because it has no basis in the Sunnah as they understand it. The Shafis view not saying Bismillah as an incomplete prayer.
Meaning Bismillah is wajib.
Bismillah is wajib for them. So the question was going to clearly become, so who will follow who in prayer? The Maliki will not recognize this because to them that's bid'ah. They disagree with it. The Shafis will not allow the Maliki to lead prayer because his prayer is incomplete. He hasn't done his full Fatiha. But it's interesting how, while independently these are the opinions they held, how for the sake of unity of the ummah, not anybody dying, but that unity, that haja to stay together was such that there was a concession that the Malikis agreed they would say Bismillah, but silently. For the Shafis, so long as you recite it, it doesn't have to be allowed. That's what matters to them. So even though the Malikis considered it a bid'ah to recite this, whether aloud or silently, that concession, that each agreed to do what it normally and independently would not do, for the sake of unity, we find there an area where scholars use the differing opinion, or did not allow differing opinions, to cause disunity. And one would agree to do what they otherwise would not agree with because of haja and the importance of unity. The other area I'd like Malam Ibrahim to take us through. Earlier you mentioned that a situation of haja could permit the haram of the means. A state of haja could allow the minor harams. Then we looked at a state of haja permitting something on which scholars would differ, and taking an opinion that takes a person out of the haja. You also mentioned, which is what I'd like you to elaborate on, that a situation of haja, when it affects a community, is treated like a darura and would make harams to become permissible. Could you elaborate on this one?
Yeah, this is true. If a community is in the state of haja, usually you consider what is at stake. Is the community at stake now? And you say haja, then it is treated like darura. The Prophet ﷺ gave concessions during the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, even on things that ordinarily you know it to disadvantage of Muslims. But because of their reality then, they were a minority, they were powerless, they were disadvantaged. And he was hoping that will help in building bridge to bigger opportunities. And he accepted it. Omar also did similar thing.
So just to mention, so the point here is the haja the community was facing was the insecurity, the lack of peace.
Yes.
So in a sense, you would then say, when the haja is affecting the whole community, it is actually more important than a haja affecting an individual.
Yes.
So that insecurity made certain things that would normally be haram to become halal. So the haja affecting the community was treated as a darura.
Yeah, including conditions that seemed to expose new Muslims, but he was fine with it.
Yeah. Normally it would be haram.
Thank you.
But it became halal because of the haja to the community.
Similarly, Umar bin Khattab made modification on this ruling of zakat. And when he saw the need and the change in context, he now said, give zakat on horses. Not only that.
And that is because there was actually a clear hadith by the Prophet
that you should not give
prohibiting
zakat
on horses. But looking at the situation
and haja, he now say give zakat on horses.
So expand the pool of zakat collection.
Because of the needs. You now have more Muslims who needed zakat. And on the other side, horses are now becoming treasure.
Yeah.
Also, you have instances where Umar suspended hads of theft. Because of haja. Haja was what? There was poverty, there was economic hardship. So by extension, we look at our own reality too and see zakat. We have a predominantly farmers here that are tuber farmers, yam, or poultry farmers, or vegetable, you know. From the Maliki point of view, all these things you can give zakat on them. But if that is the only economic source of earning, money in that community, what is the purpose of zakat? So if there is this need, then it becomes, you can now legislate zakat on the scholars who say, okay, give zakat on them.
Because
Even
you do have a lot of poor people.
Yes.
You do have a community with Hajj.
yes, even though from the mazhab it is not. But looking at the reality, and it has now become a need, you allow
It's
it.
treated like a darura.
Sometimes Islam will even allow paying zakat in advance when there is a need for it. So all of these tell you that if a community is in state of haja, it becomes like darura, in that it changes haram to halal. Or in some situation, it can make haram halal. Yes, sir.
Malam Nasir, what other examples will you give us of the rulings that change because the community is facing haja?
I think just to remember the idea of proportionality of gravity of hardship relating to the quantity of concession, or the quality of the concession that is usually justified when it comes to relaxing darura. I think it's good to remember that, particularly from the angle of quantity, because here we are talking about community, and that is why you find scholars considering haja of a community to be treated like a darura. Now, if you look at this carefully, you would find scholars coming up with a lot of examples. A typical case in point, I think, is this issue of COVID-19. It was a pandemic that affected the entire world.
It is.
It's still existing. At least it's a bit better now, particularly in places like Nigeria. So that is why probably I said it was. It is. And that is why you will see scholars considering this issue of it is a haja of the community and treating it as a darura, to the level of issuing fatwas about suspending congregational prayer, about suspending even Hajj. And you hardly can find any scholar with the right credentials having problem, particularly on the issue of Hajj. Everybody was, yes, this is the right thing to do, because it's a question of protecting the life of people. Imagine what will happen in the era of COVID-19 if Hajj is allowed to be conducted.
Fitna.
That will be a serious problem for the entire world. So this is a typical example. Another example is how, for the purpose of public interest, you find scholars permitting the idea of professional spies and deception for the purpose of internal and external security in a society. Of course, deception is of certain level, is different levels, but you can find some semblance of that as a strategy adopted by the companions and even Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam at certain point in history, during one of the battles, when they were gathering information and they met some people and they asked them about certain things. After responding back to the Prophet, and then they asked back, who are you? From where are you coming? Because of strategy of war and the sensitivity of information and security, look at the kind of answer that Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave. He said, "Nahnu min ma'in." It's not completely, saying what is actually not true, but it has some semblance of, strategy not to disclose clear information and probably to confuse the person that is asking the question. And it's subject to you. It's a very ambiguous statement that one can interpret it whichever way he wants. So I think these are things that if you look at them carefully, you will see some ideas around the permissibility of building this kind of things for security purposes, for greater good. Another example that you find scholars usually giving is this issue of security men or security personnel protecting people while they pray Jum'ah, not praying along with people. And most scholars feel it's okay with that because of the importance of security of the society or of the people. And another very interesting, probably a controversial one, is this position of some scholars regarding the need for societies to restrict the authority of considering or calling somebody a kafir to the court or fatwa councils instead of individual scholars. And personally, I think it's a very good fatwa, particularly if you look at what it will do in trying to regulate Muslim community and ensure that peace peace is allowed to reign in the society. Look at how takfir is flying all over in the Muslim societies today, and how that kind of regulation will bring some sense and some, reasonableness, if I can use that word, into the idea of who comes in or who gets out of Islam. Because the moment you say court, you are talking about an institution that would carefully study things before it arrived at a position. Or if you say fatwa council, you are talking about scholars with different levels of expertise and knowledge, studying things before they blow things out. In this kind of proposal, you hardly can find emotion really having space in this kind of things. And these are things that if you are reading the books of scholars, you would find scholars insisting on this mawani, the wabit of takfir that has to be really carefully looked at. Look at how Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam talked about this issue of, the challenge in throwing somebody with the word kafir, and that if you throw it, it's something that faqad ba'a biha ahadukuma, that if you throw it, then definitely one of you will live with it. If he's not a kafir, then automatically you are
Allah
one.
will treat you as the kafir.
Exactly. So I think these are some of the important examples that you would find around this particular issue. And scholars are using the evidence of masalih al-mursala, these tools of istidlal, as we keep mentioning, masalih al-mursala, fathul dhariya, of Qarafi, of course, proposed by Imam al-Qarafi, istihsan, saddu dhariya, in trying to apply these issues, in trying to address these issues for the purpose of community and common good. And this is very important in protecting the community so that they don't fall into the state of darura, which is going to be catastrophic, which is going to be disastrous. And again, the importance of this triangulation, because it will keep coming up, particularly on the issues of concession, issues of weighing into measuring and understanding the level of harm or benefit. Triangulation is very important because it gives different perspectives in trying to look at issues and ensure that certainty has been established. Allahu alam.
Thank you very much. I think you've demonstrated with ample cases and examples from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the time of the Sahaba, and positions of scholars, why a state of haja, when it is being faced by a community, nobody is dying, but it is treated seriously enough to make permissible certain things that were normally prohibited, or vice versa, to prohibit certain things that would normally be permissible. Nasir, what more can you tell us outside the case of darurat and darura situation and haja situation? A person in tahsini, no problems. What is this person's situation when it comes to any form of concessions at all?
Well, I think still going back to our established guideline, we established that what scholars looked at is this proportionality, direct proportionality between concession and gravity of hardship, and of course the size of serious form of concession, and they look at the kind of haram that should be relaxed. So now in the case of tahsini, this is the domain of luxury. Is about comfort, where scholars will unanimously agree that it is considered to be the opposite of darura, of course, and therefore there is no any hardship there, and you hardly can find scholars making concession at that particular level, be it at the level of haram of the means or that of the end. But I think one important thing, or some of the issues that we need to reflect over and think about when discussing tahsini and appreciate the need to having this tahsini in the society, is the fact that for wealthy people, really, it could be tahsini. But for those who that gives an opportunity for employment, for example, for them it's not tahsini. Probably it could be a haja or even darura. And appreciating also the dynamics of this idea of tahsini and how it's viewed in different perspectives. Example, electricity, for example, in a village, it might be considered a tahsini because villager is not used to electricity. He doesn't have much need for it.
Doesn't depend on it.
He has lived without it.
Exactly. He has lived without it. He doesn't depend on it. His livelihood is not...
Or at least village in Nigeria.
Of course, village in Nigeria. I can't tell of villages in other societies, but I'm wondering if a village will really, really require electricity, what will you still call it a village? So he doesn't depend on it. He doesn't necessarily see the necessity or the need to having it. So for him, it could be a tahsini. But if you come to the city, for example, if you go to the supermarket, or if you go to some of our houses, for example,
or hospital or banks.
I mean, for some supermarkets, for some of us in our houses, I think we can elevate the status of electricity, if not to the level of darura, maybe to the level of haja. And now think about banks in the era of internet. Think about hospitals in the world of e-medicine, or what they call telemedicine. And how electricity becomes maybe in the world we live in fact, even artificial intelligence will be regarded as darura in certain contexts, not just electricity. So the need for us to appreciate these dynamics and how certain things that are considered by you or others as tahsini, as just luxury or just beautification or comfort, might turn out to be a darura or even a haja to somebody. And another important thing is how certain things that are viewed by individuals, by certain cultures as just tahsini, might appear to be a darura or even a haja for the purpose of public policy or for governance. In a society like Nigeria, or any other society that is developing, industries like tourism, for example, like entertainment industries, are not really treated, and the professionals that are associated with these industries are not really seen as just placed at the level of tahsini, because they get to the level of haja. If you look at what value they actually provide to the society, how they contribute into the GDP of the society, how they contribute into the economy of the society, and all these kind of things. So I think the need for us to be able to unpack these kind of things and to think deeply over how the dynamics of this idea or this subject of tahsiniyat and how it works to different people differently, and the implication of that. And again, I think that takes us back to the idea of evidence. The evidence that I usually use are still the evidence of maslaha, saddu dhariya, these maqasid tools that scholars usually call, or the istidlal tools that help in protecting the common good of the society or the common good of an individual. These are equally some of the important tools that scholars looked at in trying to understand the issue of tahsiniyat and how it works for different people in the society.
Ana Ibrahim, what would you add to this?
Yeah, he has said much, but just to say, number one, the need for us to know the limits, and as scholars of Islamic studies or various areas of Islamic knowledge, we should know our limitation and our competence. Number two, this also brings us to the relevance of fatwa. That fatwa could be local. There are issues that you might be doing more harm than good to go online seeking for issues that are local, very local in context. Similarly, that it's difficult to have a scholar or to expect all scholars to actually arrive at a similar answer. When they are not in the same place, they don't know the context. So on issues like this, basically what it is telling us is, as interesting as this area seems, because it is giving licenses and concessions, It's not as simple as ABC. You need to really be broad and have a bigger picture and insight into all the formulas provided and the realities and how to compare who is really in need, who is really in darura, what is really the case at hand, what are the impacts, what if you do it, what if you don't do it, doing it, what will it lead to, not doing it, what will it lead to. A number of all these circumstances have to be brought into perspective before one can conclude and take position. Simply put, these things are not just for everybody. They are for a scholar who knows the reality of the people and the context and has relevant knowledge. Sometimes it might even involve getting consultants and experts' view on some of these things. And of course, sometimes the person in question too. So this is it.
Well, I think in addition to what Brother Ibrahim Bello mentioned on the need for us to develop or build local expertise because of these local issues that are around us, and not to rely on, Sheikh Google and other, the online fatwa shops. I think another very important dimension of this point is the need for us to also look at historical context, and the need for us to be more deliberate in trying to produce scholars that will address these historical contextual problems that are tied to our history. We acknowledged how the world is rapidly changing, how things are becoming, how the past is becoming completely alien, unlike what is obtainable in the present time. And therefore, there is a need for the Muslim Ummah as a society to be deliberate in producing competent scholars that that have the expertise and understanding of, the realities of today, and are deep and have a deeper understanding of the religious sciences, particularly this knowledge of qawaid and maqasid. What I find interesting with the subject of qawaid is it is the past that is presented in such a way that informed the future, and the maqasid is a tool that guides the processes of addressing new issues. So I think we need scholars to utilize these very important subject areas in trying to address the problems of our geographical context and also our historical context. And the need also for the society or the Muslim Ummah to equally expand the cycles of fatwa to accommodate expertise in different fields of life and allow this very deep understanding of issues as against superficial understanding by a scholar, and speaking on issues that you can see visibly that this scholar probably have not really understood this concept very well. And I think there are a lot of examples in this country, Nigeria, and even beyond, where you find fatwas made by scholars, respected scholars, but you can understand, you can see visibly that this sheikh really have not understood deeply has not gotten the insight in this particular subject area. Things around developments in medicine today and their implications, things around cryptocurrency and bitcoins and what have you. So I think these are issues that the society really need to be deliberate in trying to provide solution to them. May Allah guide us.
I mean, Alhamdulillah. And I think, the discussion also has highlighted in one of the last points you made. Earlier on, there was this discussion that even the classification of maqasid according to various criteria is a scholarly human effort to guide and ensure reasoning is not arbitrary when it comes to giving these concessions.
Yeah, sure.
That we follow consistent principles that are derived from how the Quran, how the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sunnah of the Sahaba, how did they handle concessions when people were in haja or darura. But one of the limitations probably of the traditional classification is what you've said, where for individuals, definitely scholars would agree that an individual in a state of tahsini is not given any concessions.
Yeah.
However, when a society is dealing with tahsini, when a society when we look at, say, the hospitality industry, when we look at tourism, you will say, well, tourism is holidaying. This is not a darura, this is not a haja. But in some societies, their entire economy is established on tourism. And without tourism, they go into abject poverty. They don't have anything else other than their beaches, their food, their culture, their mountains, their forests, or their wildlife. That's what people come to see. And while one would say these are tahsinis for the visitors, for the tourists, for the host community, this is darura. This is a haja that is treated, they say the haja tanzil manzilat darura, that the haja is treated like a darura. But I think in conclusion, just what you've said, the need for more Muslims to understand that we have various scholars with various specializations, and many who would not understand the nuances of principles that regulate how concessions or rukhas are applied, how how saddu zariya and maslaha, istihsan, how these tools are used for individuals and communities facing different levels of haja. And as you've already mentioned, this is what makes it really dangerous for you to start criticizing a mufti of another society who is saying something that normally would be considered haram in your society, but is saying is halal in his society. Or is saying something that is halal is haram in his society. And to you, what? Doesn't he know Quran? Doesn't he know Sunnah? And unless you are somebody who has studied this area of usul, qawaid, maqasid, if all you know is tafsir or all you know is the hadith sciences, these sciences are important, but in the hadith sciences and in the Quranic sciences, you are not taught about maslaha and saddu zariya and urf and, haja to a community and darura and rukhas and these areas. So the need for us to really try to start introducing more scholars who belong to other fields, but to recognize what are scholars in this field better at. Otherwise, the tendency is a jurist who is distinguished in his area gives a fatwa, but another scholar with thousands and millions of followers criticizes this scholar, but is actually criticizing a scholar because he himself is not an expert in that field. And this is a great injustice done to jurists who are supposed to be respected by their communities, but somebody else who is very popular criticizes this person and people stop listening to the expert. And that is to the detriment of the whole society. I'd like to stop there, inshallah. Thank you both for your contributions on this subject. Jazakumullahu khairan. Until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.